Hello, 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 and welcome back to another episode of This Is Me Attitude Podcast with me, your one and only host, Rachel Hills, just a girl in her 20s, trying to figure this crazy life out and bringing you along the way every single step of the way. And this episode is no different. Today we have another guest speaker on, and I am so very excited for you to hear this conversation I have with Jami. I do want to say a little bit of a disclaimer. The audio on her end didn't pick up as well as I was hoping, so there might be a little few creaks and cracks and all the things there, but listen anyways. I know you're going to take some insight from her because you can still hear her, you can still hear her voice, you can still hear her story, and you can still see how God has moved in her life. So let's listen. Welcome back to another episode of This Is Me Attitude Podcast. Today we have another amazing guest speaker with us. This is Jami, and I'm super excited for her to come on and talk about her faith and talk about her journey with God. And her and I met via social media, as I've met a lot of the guest speakers that have been on the podcast lately, and I'm super excited. So without further ado, I would love for Jami to introduce herself. So welcome.
Thank you. I feel very honored to be here because to be able to share my testimony, it's not so much my testimony, it's like more of a testimony of who God is. So thank you for allowing me to be on here. I am in my 20s, I'm 22. I am married and I've been a Christian now officially in December, it'll be almost 2 years. So.
That's so cool. I would have never guessed that it's only been about 2 years because the way that we've talked in DMs, it sounds like you've been a Christian forever and that you just have such a strong faith. So that's really exciting. And I'm excited to see how the conversation goes today. I didn't mean to cut you off. Is there anything else that you wanted to say to the listeners?
Oh, you're good. My husband and I are also working on business plans. So like we have multiple ideas. Okay, we're like idea people. So we get like 100 different ideas, and it's like we have to figure out what to toss and what to keep. So right now, our main thing is my husband's wood and accessory business. We're still fixing up that to get the social media out there. And a new idea that popped up was for a coloring book. So my husband and I like to draw little sketches and stuff. So
That's really cool.
yeah. So we're definitely artsy business people.
Awesome. I love it. Awesome. Well, I just wanted to let the listeners know that we will be going through the same questions that I've had other speakers go through, but I think it's really exciting to see how it's the same question, but each person has their own journey and their own walk with God, for lack of better words. So that's why I've decided to keep the same questions. And then like I said before, I'm super excited to see how God moves through us. And we hope as we're talking to you that God is with you and that maybe you get something from one of our stories that relates to you or that you can be more in the word or anything like that. So without further ado, I will jump into the first question, and that is when and how did you become a Christian / accept Jesus into your life?
Oh man. So I first started going to church when I was 7. My dad initiated that. I mean, he grew up in the church when he was a kid, and so did my mom. But it wasn't really until a couple years later into my childhood that they started. And they went for a while, and then they kind of fell away from the church, and then it was kind of just me going to the youth groups once I got a little bit older. Um, I was also homeschooled, so I was like very isolated, and church kind of became my only like safe place, and also my only place to feel like I could connect with people. Um, and outside of like running errands and stuff, I didn't really make friends. So yeah, church was really my main place. Um, Home was really tough. Don't want to get into too much detail of that, but it kind of also became an escapism. So like anytime I was able to go to church, I was like, yes, please take me. Um, and then I kind of ran away for a while when I was a teenager from the church and anything to do with God because like I saw my parents as somebody I could trust to see who God is because they, you know, follow God and so they were Christians. So it was like I looked so much to them, and I didn't really see the qualities of God that I was reading in the Bible. And like it made me really hate anything to do with God in the Bible because I thought my parents were the prime example, you know. Um, but it wasn't really until I met my husband, the Lord brought me. Um, that really changed my idea and viewpoints. And a little bit prior to that, before I moved back to California, I had a friend in Idaho that I was talking to about the Bible and doing these Bible studies with. And this was during a time that like I was into witchcraft and stuff because I thought it was safe, you know. Um, and anyways, um, but after meeting that friend and I went to California, was there alone for a little while. I had a friend that was letting me stay with her, and then I went on a few dates, and then that's when my husband came into my life, and he really just had the love of God like in his heart, and he really showed me what that looks like, and that really just changed my perspective. Like after a few days of not talking to him after a first date, it really just changed my heart. Like it disturbed me in a good way. Like it moved me in a good way, and um, we started dating a couple weeks later, and then we moved across the US to PA, stayed there for a while, and then when we moved down to Florida in December of 2021, that's when I decided to get baptized again. Because I had got baptized when I was 11, but I feel like it counted more so now that I fully understand who God is and being able to have people in my life that really showed that. Um, and also just like giving up my own preconceived ideas of like who I thought Christians are supposed to look like.
Mhm.
So I really started chasing after God once I got baptized, almost 2 years now.
That's awesome. And thank you for going through each step of your journey because I feel like the listeners will maybe be able to grab onto one little part of it or one other little part of it or however you want to look at that way. And I can definitely relate when talking about realizing later, like things you were doing, you're like, oh, God didn't want me to look into that. Like how you were saying how you were looking into
Yeah.
witchcraft things. Like
Mhm.
and my perspective of it, I was looking at manifestation stuff and I was saying like the I am statements and things like that. And I was like, oh, but it's fine. Like I'm still in my Bible and stuff. And then I had a real big realization that I'm like, oh, shoot, no, like this isn't the same. Like I have to stay with what God wants me to do. So I think that's nice to highlight because each person has a different like time period. I feel like, I mean, it's all God's plan and that we don't have the same plan for two people, and that's been my biggest struggle is like seeing other people like maybe succeeding faster than me but realizing like, oh, that's not what he had planned for me, or feeling like they're a better Christian than me because they're in the Bible more, they understand the Bible better. So I think that's cool to be able to show that it's different timelines, like I said, and just moving forward with that. So that leads into the next question that I had, which is where have you seen God work the most in your life? Or one of your like top ones, because I know a lot of times believers have a
Ooh.
ton of different stories.
Um, that time. Okay, so something that is a really key factor in my journey with the Lord is how much of a transformation He really made on me personally. Like before I was following Jesus, I was drinking, I was smoking, I was lusting after other people, I was going to some parties and just going on all these dates with guys, just bouncing around, and I wasn't really following God. Like I knew there was something else out there in the universe, you know, but I wasn't really following God, and I really dishonored my body by being with different people and just really living a worldly lifestyle before following Jesus. Um, as I mentioned before, being into witchcraft and stuff like that. And since I started with my relationship with God, it just like opened my eyes to so many things that were sins that I didn't realize back then were sins, you know? Like the only thing I was really feeling back then was just feeling lonely and feeling like there is more to life, but I couldn't quite find it, you know? And after becoming a Christian, I started putting in prayer for making new friends that really followed after God, and started putting in prayer to not be so lonely. That was one of my first prayers, actually, about not being so lonely. It was literally the night before I met my husband. I put a prayer out there. I was like, okay, whatever being is out there, please. Like, I'm so like lonely and like just feel alone, even though I have these friends around me, you know. Um, and then another one was praying for a car, seeing God how He works in that. Um, the car when we first moved to Florida was like our key thing because all we had was borrowing my mother-in-law's car to do DoorDash or Uber, and that lasted only for so long. Um, and the Lord really blessed us. He worked through a friend that we had at the time, and her dad actually bought us the car. And she helped pay for the insurance and everything to get started. It was just such a big blessing. So that was another big thing. Um, and then just praying for my friends and family, just my relationship with them, and just forming better bonds with them. Was another spot in my life that I seen God really work.
That's awesome. And that sounds like such a cool experience, especially with the car and having to fully rely on God. I definitely feel like that's where I'm at right now. And the stage of life is realizing that I can't do it without Him. So putting that like pride aside or whatever other word that you want to put in that category is it's interesting and it's hard. It's not exactly the easiest thing ever. Like I feel a lot of times
Yeah,
that the like world makes it look like being a Christian and following God is like the easiest thing ever when He puts us through different things to make us stronger, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be easier in the right now. So that's, I think, a cool story to show that, just the fact that, like, I'm sure in the moment you were just like, oh my goodness, like, how is it ever going to change? But then now looking back, you're just like, oh, like the Lord blessed us. So that's so cool. I
yeah,
get really
yeah.
excited when I hear how God
One
works in people's lives.
one more thing I wanted to add to that is just kind of an encouragement is that so when I first met my husband, we were living in California. He had a place to stay. Things got shaky with my friend, and I ended up sleeping out on the beach. And my first night out on the beach, my husband Chris, he actually stayed with me. And we were out on the beach, out on the streets. We were sleeping in our friend's car that he had, and we slept on a mountain. We slept underneath like this bridge in Santa Barbara. It was crazy, but like I never felt so free, you know? Like I had this big blessing with my husband, but then I was also struggling. Um, but God brought us out of that homelessness, and his mom paid for our plane tickets to go to Pennsylvania, um, and be able to live with her. And we were living in a living room, okay? Like we've been to all kinds of places. And then after that, we moved to Florida and we turned a gazebo into a little outside house. So we're living in that for a while. And then finally, it was last April, we were able to move into one of the houses my grandmother has on her property. And so now we have like our own half of the trailer. So we have like everything we need in there, like air conditioning. So it's like I have to remind myself, and I want this to be encouragement to people that I may feel like you're stuck in this season of waiting and struggles, but the Lord is going to bring you out of that. He's going to bring you out of that. And right now, where my husband and I are at, we really want our own house. We really want our own land. And so I just have to keep reminding myself of where we came from to encourage myself to know that God is going to bring us out of that again, as He always has.
Oh, that's so cool. Thank you for sharing that. That's definitely a good add-on. So I'm glad that we had that in there. So that leads into the next question, actually, which is what made you decide to share your faith as much as you do? And I do want to preface that, though, like I said earlier, the way that Jami and I connected was over social media. And I think I reached out first. I don't really remember. But I saw that she was posting a lot about her faith and a lot about her growing in her faith, and I just was really inspired by it. And that's also why I wanted to bring her on to the podcast because I knew that she had a story to share. And so I'm very excited to hear kind of how it started.
Oh man. Really what makes me share my faith is just seeing God work every day in my life. Like changing my habits. And changing my habits is such a big thing. Even like the smallest little things. Like I struggle with biting my nails, but that's still something I pray to God about. Even the littlest things He can help you out with. And changing my habits as far as like eating healthier has been another struggle. Like oh man, that's been a big one. Exercising, and then also gossiping has been another big thing. It's really hard to not talk about people, you know, like you always want to share stuff like, oh, did you hear about this? Did you hear about that? And it's like that's another thing that I've been praying about, and having the Lord just change my habits on that. So I'm just changing my habits and helping with that and just seeing Him work in that way. A verse that came to mind um, when seeing the Lord work is Philippians 4:13. It says, "For I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength." So in those things I struggle with, he definitely provides the strength. And another key point in why I share my faith is um, I've had a lot of trauma in my past, and just the other night, actually, I had a really big trigger come up, and I just remember just sitting in the shower, and I curled up into a ball, and I was crying. Um, and the Lord just held me. He just held me that He said, "You got this. I'm right here with you. You got this." And just that encouragement, just feeling His presence, knowing that I can get through that, helped me to pull back out of those triggers and understand where I'm at now and who the person that God has made me to be now. Um, so definitely also working through emotions is another thing that God has really helped me with. So that's why on my social media, you'll see me share a lot about, oh, I went through this thing, or like I struggled with this moment, and here's how God works. So that's exactly why I want to share my faith, is just seeing Him work every day in His miracles.
Well, thank you for sharing. I feel like it's definitely inspired more than just me. So I'm sure that there's others out there that will see it and see how good God is. I mean, that's, and like it says in scripture that we are supposed to go out and make more disciples. And it's just,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's proof that you are doing that. You're showing your faith and you're showing how good He is and how much He can help in everyone's life. And that is something to rely on, because a lot of people I feel like are like, oh, I don't have anything to rely on. I don't have this, I don't have that. And like I with I'm in the season of I'm growing a lot in my faith, and sometimes I just want to like yell at people and be like, just listen to Jesus. But like you don't want to come across like that because that's a little scary. So that's
Yeah.
a cool way of doing it, is in showing it on social media and just having conversations like we're having now. So then that also leads into the next one of, what is your favorite part about church overall or in an individual service? And with that being said, it doesn't have to be a specific service or time. It could be just like, if you think of church as more than just at the building itself, like any aspect of that is really where I'm coming from with that question.
Um, this kind of goes back to my childhood, but I used to think church was a traditional thing that you had to go to. Like you have to go every Sunday or Wednesday or whatever day it was, and you have to go. And something that the Lord really taught my husband and I, especially because we worked in a couple different ministries while being in Florida, and my husband Chris, he's worked in ministries before I met him, because he used to live in Florida before he had moved to all the states like I did, but um, just working ministries, getting to see that hands-on work, and just going to church on a regular basis, and then also praying about it. What the Lord wants us to do. He really encouraged us, encouraged my husband and I to only go when He calls us. And um, when He does that, when He encourages us to attend church at specific times, each and every time there's either been like a really powerful prayer that was specific to our situation, there was something that we needed to learn, there was a person that we needed to meet, because there's been several times that the Lord has told us to go to church, and we were just praying to the Lord like, hey, we really need the money to help, feed our rabbits at the time and to help feed us. And somebody just like handed us $50, at church. And another one is um, building relationships there with specific people at the right time has been another big thing. Um, Going back to when Chris and I had got a car, we actually met that person because we showed up to a young adults meeting when it was canceled. And the Lord's like, just go, just go. I was like, okay, we'll go. And that's the exact person we met there later on. Her and her family bought the car for us. So it's just things like that that really make those moments even more special when going to church, because we know when we go, the Lord is going to do something that we're not even going to expect.
That's so cool. And I feel like I say that after everything that you've said, but I really genuinely mean that. And it shows that like we can't see His plan. We can't see what He's gonna do next. And just the fact that you and your husband are fully reliant on Him and are like, okay, whatever you say, we're gonna do, like that shows how strong and in depth your faith is, because I feel like there's a lot of maybe like first time Christians are just going into the faith that aren't that comfortable and are like, but what do you mean I have to sell everything and move or whatever it is? So that's really cool to see that it's growing in you guys and that you're moving forward with it and that it's actually paid off, for lack of better words, because he's shown you in different ways of just putting you in the right room with that right person or that right prayer, because prayer is very important. And I think that's another aspect that isn't as shown as much of how important it is, because that's our way of communicating with him.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's important to go to church when called. Somebody had posted something saying, what if someone came up to you at church when you walked in and said, "Are you supposed to be here?" How would you feel? That was an interesting post. And I thought about it. And at first I was like, why would somebody ask that? And then I thought about it. I was like, you know what? The Lord calls us for important things. You know, He calls us for things that He has set for us. And that's why it's so important to go to church when God calls you. Like, I mean, even outside that, you can still learn great things going to church. But I think it's especially important to listen when God is calling you to go. Especially when it's on days you really don't want to go. Those are probably the days that you should probably go.
Very true. Cool. Well, thank you. And the next one that I have is, what would you like listeners to get out of our conversation today? Is there anything specific that you want them to take home with them?
Oh man. Um, don't look at what the people are doing in the church. That's an important thing is stop looking at what people are doing, stop looking at the problems or mistakes that they're going through and looking to them for what to do next. Like we're supposed to be looking at Jesus. Like that's the first and foremost biggest thing. And that's what I struggled with when being in the church as a kid and throughout my teenage years is just looking at people for that confirmation of God to see where God is at. And listen, people are imperfect. They are imperfectly imperfect and they're going to make mistakes and sin. And I allowed me looking at people to disrupt my time with God when I was going to church in my younger years. And that's why it's so important to follow Jesus and also pray for the people that are struggling around you. That's another big thing. A verse I had that came to mind for this situation was Psalms 118:8. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in people. And that is because God has a set plan for us. That is because God is perfect. And um, that is why when we look to people, they will fail us because they have their own walk with the Lord. So that's why it's so important to read your Bible and also pray about what church you're going to. That's another important thing.
I love it. That is so many different things that listeners can take away from. So if you're listening to this, I hope that you go back and press repeat and just write it all down and really think about that and pray and see exactly what aspect that you're supposed to be working in this season. Because that is one thing that I have a struggle with, is that I want to fix everything all at once, and I'm like, but God, I can do it all
Mm-hmm.
in this. And then he's like, I feel like he kind of just laughs at me in heaven, like, no, you can't. You need to do one thing at a time, like I tell you. So
Yeah.
awesome. Well, the last but not least question I have is, where can everyone find you? That if they love this conversation, want to reach out, want to ask more, want to know more about you, where's the best way to contact you?
This is Instagram right now. My Instagram is Lazarine. It is LAZARIENN. And then you can also follow my husband. He does sermons once in a while on there. His is Lazarix, LAZARIS.
Perfect. I highly suggest you listeners go follow them and go see all of their different moving pieces of the businesses. Like she said in the beginning, they have a lot of different ideas and are moving forward with a lot. I love following along in your journey because I can definitely see that you guys are moving in the direction that you want to and are doing all the things there. So again, thank you so much for coming on to today's episode. And I can just tell somebody's going to get a really good takeaway from it. So thank you so much.
Yes, and thank you, Rachel, for having me here. This was awesome.
Wasn't that an amazing conversation? Didn't you get so much out of her talking about her faith and about her journey and about how her and her husband fully rely on God? I cannot believe how much I got out of that conversation and how much I learned, and it is amazing. And I think it's absolutely incredible how strong her faith is at the fact that she's only 22 years old. That is amazing. And I want to say again, thank you so much, Jami, for coming on and having this conversation with me and you, listener. If you got anything out of today's episode, please do not hesitate to reach out to either one of us. I will have both of our handles for Instagram in the notes below, but you know what mine is, at Rachel Von Hills. Please let me know what your takeaways were for today or any other conversation that we've had on the podcast. And until next time, never ever forget, God loves you.